Hey Fitz, how's it going?
Pretty good. You know, I'm recording in my closet because there's a heat wave and our office air conditioner is broken. But that's good. You know, it's like going back to the old days.
Yeah, I'm recording from in my van in Wyoming right now, so I feel like we're really winning.
We're on brand.
This.
We're on brand right now.
Dirtbag Diaries. Yep. We're really doing it. So while I've been out here, I've been putting the finishing touches on this week's episode, and it's got me thinking a lot about tools.
What do you mean? How so?
Well, and so I've been thinking about all the tools that help us do the things that we love to do, right? Like things like the perfectly sized, worn-in pair of climbing shoes or a freshly waxed pair of skis. And, you know, like, I want to put it out there that I am not a minimalist, right? Like, I wouldn't say I'm a total gear junkie, but I do really like to find the best tool for the job.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. Like when I have the right tool, I'm like, this is the right tool. And I have my opinions about them too. I also think the tool is unique to each of us a lot of times. I mean, those things you brought up, they're kind of general, right? But I think there's even, like, if you drill down, there's some nuance in it. It's like you like your certain type of perfectly sized, perfectly worn in climbing shoes, right? You have your opinion on that, I think, if you get serious about something. And so the tool that people select often says a little bit about the person. I remember kind of hearing about this older fly fisherman who was really into steelhead fly fishing, which is steelhead of the fish of 1,000 casts. It's a difficult pursuit. You rarely catch fish. Already there's no barb on those hooks because of catch and release. But he got to the stage where he actually filed down the tip of the hook so that it became blunt. And so that when the fish, you know, grabbed onto the fly, it didn't go into a mouth, but it held. It, you know, it would hold against its inside its mouth if he kept the right amount of tension. And what he was looking for was connection. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't holding a fish up to take a photo of it. It was a connection to another being through fly fishing. And that's how he made his tool. It doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, it's insane. Evolution. It's insane. But that's ultimately when he distilled it down, that was the tool he chose to, you know, use in his craft. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy to think about what many would see as kind of the perfect tool for the job and then seeing him kind of turn away from that. And I wonder what you think he kind of gets from that.
You know, when someone does something like that, where they take a tool and on a level, they reduce it or make it simpler, they distill it down to its essence, they actually gain something by taking something away. And I think there are other examples in our world of outdoor sports like that. And the one that comes to mind is the single speed mountain bike.
Yeah, Fitz, do you happen to know who Alexandra Houchin is?
Oh, hell yeah, I do. I'm very excited for today's show. She is a long distance mountain biker. And right now in the world of bike packing, long distance, these are hundreds of mile races, thousands of miles races sometimes. It's an incredible chapter. Right now, the women in particular are as competitive as they've ever been. Almost every year at some of the big races, records are falling. And if you're a fan of cycling, like on any level, it's been cool to see. And it's wild because, you know, it's not like the Tour de France where there's guys on motorcycles zipping behind the riders and you get to watch it on televised TV or on NBC, right? There's no way to do this. And there's basically just each competitor has a GPS and there's a website where you can watch them. It's called dot watching. And people tune in religiously. And sometimes they'll go find people on the courses. And Alexander's been a star in this world of ultra racing.
Yeah, I mean, she has just been smashing records year after year after year, and that's how she got on our radar. You know, and in this already kind of niche world of ultra endurance mountain bike racing, she's like part of this even more niche world of riders that races with a single gear. And here on the Diaries, I mean, it's a pretty special thing when we get to talk to someone who's right in the middle of kind of changing their whole sport and the way that people think about it. But I think what's even more special for us is when we get to kind of peek behind the curtain and hear someone's journey and find that time and time again, the story is so much bigger than the numbers.
Yeah. So today we present The Underdog, a story about Alexandra's unusual journey to healing and a life she could never have envisioned for herself growing up.
I'm Lauren Delane Miller.
I'm Fitzco Hall. You're listening to The Dirtbag Diaries.
Usually, I introduce myself in like the Ojibwe way, my indigenous language way, but I always feel like it's weird to do on the radio. My English name is Alexandra Houchin, and I live in the Fond du Lac tribal community in northern Minnesota. I call Fond du Lac my home, but I travel way too much to race my mountain bike. Yeah, I guess my day job is a professional ultra endurance mountain bike racer, which is both a mouthful and a dream come true.
In the last few years, Alexandra has become a legend in the crazy world of ultra endurance mountain bike racing.
There's pre-bike Alexandra and current bike Alexandra.
And last year, she set out to complete something that pre-bike Alexandra would have thought was entirely insane.
You know, the Triple Crown Challenge started long before I actually made it to the starting line of that arduous journey.
For bikepacking enthusiasts, the Triple Crown Challenge is like the World Series. If the World Series included weeks of racing through the mountains for thousands of miles on bikes with only a handful of finishers each year. As the name implies, the Triple Crown means racing 3 of the country's biggest, burliest courses in a single year. Combining the Tour Divide, the Colorado Trail, and the Arizona Trail, the stats are staggering. Triple Crown hopefuls will ride 4,000 miles of trail with around 330,000 feet of elevation gain. For top racers, the riding takes about a month, with a few weeks in between races, but the grueling schedule dominates their whole year. The first race begins in June, and the last race ends in October. Everything in between is recovery. And Alexandra wasn't just trying to finish the challenge. She was trying to win. Oh, and also, she would be on a single speed bike. But we'll get back to that. So, while technically the start of Alexandra's Triple Crown Challenge started on June 9th, 2023, this story, like all good stories, started long, long ago.
I grew up in southern Wisconsin in a trailer park that was like right across the street from the General Motors factory in Janesville, Wisconsin. And I lived there with my dad and my grandmother, my dad's mom. Oh, she always bought me all these corny shirts. But one of the shirts said, "Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars."
But growing up, shooting for the moon didn't exactly come easily to Alexandra.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a cashier. That's like where I saw people who looked like me. I didn't know anything about the outdoor world. I didn't know that like people rode bikes for fun. I didn't know that people exercised for fun. I didn't have any idea, like even the tiniest glimpse that what I'm doing now was even possible, let alone that it could be somebody's job.
Her teenage years were hard. She got into drugs,
prescription pills and heroin and all those kind of drugs.
And she struggled to find community. After graduating from high school, she moved to nearby Madison. And not long after, she found herself in an abusive relationship, working at a nearby hospital, trying to get from one day to the next. And then, one day, while she was driving to work, she was in an accident.
It terrified me of driving, so I got a bicycle. I had a 10-mile commute from my apartment to the job I was working. And like, I was just in a really unhappy place in my life, unhappy place with the relationship that I was in. And it was the space that I could get away. I didn't get myself in any trouble. I was just commuting to and from work.
She started bike commuting in late summer, but soon the Wisconsin winter settled in, and Alexandra kept riding.
I had a couple of bike rides where my toes were like frozen off when I had gotten to work. I had one memory of biking, but it was so cold, so windy, and I biked to work and my feet were so cold. It hurt so bad to walk, and I sat on the counter in the bathroom and just put my feet in warm water, and the pain, it was like excruciating. I'd never been in so much physical discomfort, but kind of just loving feeling like I had some sort of freedom where I was like, okay, even though it's uncomfortable, I made it out the other side.
Alexandra would have to leave hours before her shift to make it, slipping and crashing through the streets of Madison. It sounds kind of miserable, but Alexandra was into it.
It turned my like really boring, monotonous life into an everyday adventure where I'd get to leave the struggle of my relationship at home and spend a couple hours just moving forward.
But one day, her bike was stolen.
So I bought a different bike off Craigslist strictly because I thought it was cute. And that was the bike that completely changed the course of my entire life. And it was meaningful because it was the first tool for movement that I had ever bought myself. So I felt really strong and capable despite having no clue what I bought.
Without knowing what it meant, Alexandra had bought her first fixed gear bicycle,
which is a bicycle with a direct drive chain. So it has one chainring on the front and then one cog on the back, and it is fixed onto the wheel. So if the wheel is moving, then the pedals are moving. If I'm going forward, I'm pedaling forward, but I can also pedal backwards. There's no coasting on a fixed gear bicycle, which I had no clue that there was such a horrendous machine out there. I didn't know anything about bikes, so I thought that was just like how new cute bikes worked.
Fixed gear bikes are undeniably harder to ride than your standard geared bicycle, but Alexandra loved it.
I was taking classes at the community college, and I locked that up one day, and some guy came up to me and he was like, "Oh, I've never seen a girl ride a brakeless fixie before." And I was just like, "Oh yeah, totally." Even though I had no clue what a brakeless fixie even meant. I had been dying to have friends. I just was really lonely. And when this guy was like, "Oh, cool bike," I was like, "Oh, I'll fake it until I make it, man. I just want some friends."
Alexandra and the guy who complimented her bike got to talking, and it turned out that he was part of a unique subset of the Madison urban bike scene.
That guy was a bike delivery person for Jimmy John's, which was like a really cool thing to do.
Alexandra didn't have much direction, but she knew she wanted to ride her bike. And delivering sandwiches seemed like an awesome way to get paid to do that very thing.
I totally got a job at Jimmy John's maybe like 6 months after meeting these guys. It was the first time I had this group of people who kind of had this same value set. Whatever else we disagreed on, we really loved riding our bikes.
Jimmy John's wasn't just a job, it opened the door to an entire community. Alexandra eventually became a bike messenger and then a bike mechanic. Slowly but surely, bikes were taking over her life, which was a pretty big leap for someone that had, just a few years prior, sworn off exercise altogether.
So I graduated high school weighing 300 pounds, and I'd had disordered eating habits throughout my entire childhood, which I just didn't know. And, to be fair, really neither did my family. But after I moved out onto my own to Madison, I was living by myself in an apartment, and my eating disorder kind of went off the rails, and I lost 90 pounds in a 3-month period. Super unhealthy. I stopped eating and became absolutely terrified of food in that time. And then my grandmother was also a really large person. And that was kind of a defining factor of her life and existence. I watched how people would treat her. People weren't super respectful or kind to her and being in a bigger body. So by the time I graduated high school, vowed to never exercise ever again after I graduated high school. And to be fair, I'm not even trying to be romantic about it. I was like pretty shitty to my body for a long time, even when I was biking and even when I was putting these huge miles in. But once I started riding my bike, that was kind of the first time in my life where food wasn't just this thing that made me feel ugly or fat. Food was this tool to allow me to go further or to be faster, because it's not all sunshine and daisies. It's been like a lot of really ugly shit got me to the place I am now.
Alexandra was seeing the ways that her bike was helping her heal her relationship with her body, and she wondered if it could help her heal other parts of her as well. She'd grown up pretty detached from her indigenous identity. She didn't know many other Native kids, and it wasn't until her mom moved to the reservation when Alexandra was in high school that she started to wonder about it.
I'd never been to a reservation in my entire life. What I was exposed to in school as a young Native woman, a young Native kid, and everything that I had learned about Natives had to do like pre-1900. And, all these ideas just reinforced that this huge part of my identity was like lost to history. And my first bike tour was from Madison, Wisconsin, and I rode to our reservation up here in northern Minnesota. It felt very significant and almost poetic.
By riding 400 miles north from Madison to the Fond du Lac Reservation, Alexandra wanted to create a physical connection between the two places. But she had hardly ever traveled that far from home, let alone on a bike. And since it was 2012, she had to figure a lot out by trial and error.
It was hilariously unprepared. I put a bike rack on the back of my bike and I strapped a backpack on there with like old used tubes. And I had a tent and a sleeping bag that I bought for like $30. It was not warm enough at all. But I just put those in trash bags and bungeed those to the back of my rack. This was before like maps and smartphones, or I didn't have a smartphone anyways. And I wrote directions from, what was that? MapQuest. I used MapQuest to like write out all these directions. Immediately got lost. Didn't bring a map. Like didn't even know my east or west or, just like all sorts of hilariously embarrassing realities. But, I left and I'd ask people for directions, and I was using public libraries to go onto the computer and like try to figure out what roads I should take, or, ended up on like way too busy or terrifying roads. And, I had this $150 bike off Craigslist and a backpack and just went along. And I saved up like $3,000, I think, for this whole summer long of bike touring. And I think in that like first 10 days, I spent like $2,000, like eating out, staying in hotels, yada, yada. I was like, I don't know where to camp. I tried poaching some state park land, camping, totally got caught. There were times where I'd find like apartment complexes and set my tent up in the courtyard of those places. Or some churchyards I'd camp in, or fire station yards. I had absolutely no idea where I was supposed to sleep. I think the beautiful part about it is that like I'd never really met a person who bike toured. I didn't really know what it was supposed to, air quoting here. I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. So I just was like, okay, I have a bike and I want to go.
The biking was hard. But Alexandra's time on the reservation was exactly what she'd hoped for. After a few weeks there, she was ready to move on. She wanted to see more of the country, and she decided to head to Boulder, Colorado. The ride didn't go as planned.
I was so lonely, and it was so scary because storms would come, and I was just like by myself that whole time. And I cut my trip short and hitched a ride back to Wisconsin.
Alexandra was figuring this whole bikepacking thing out on her own. She had friends in Madison that rode bikes, but none that had done any long-distance touring. Well, except for one.
I had this like kind of crush on this guy who worked at a bike shop in Madison, and he was going to ride this ride called the Tour Divide on his single speed that same year. And I had no idea what that was at the time.
Alexandra watched online as her crush raced from Banff, Alberta to Antelope Wells, New Mexico. It was an unfathomable distance, and watching his dot move steadily across the country, Alexandra reflected on her own summer of touring and how she'd called it quits. She'd given up, and it didn't sit right with her.
I was just like having this inner turmoil of, I didn't do what I said I was going to do, which like up to that point had kind of been my MO. I dropped out of college a million times. I started and failed a lot of diets. I started and quit a million things. It just kind of planted a seed. It was like, what kind of person are you if you don't do what you say you're going to do? Like, what else matters if you don't match up with the words you speak?
Over the next few years, Alexandra worked to build up both her fitness and her confidence. She rode around Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio, including riding the perimeters of various nearby counties. Most importantly, she was setting goals and seeing them through.
Which I think actually started help building my self-esteem, which you have to have a decent amount of self-esteem to like even sign up for a race, let alone cross the finish line.
When we come back, Alexandra decides to take it up a notch.
Support for the Diaries comes from Kuat Racks. They've released the Ibex, an overlanding truck bed rack that handles substantial loads both on and off the grid, because we could all use some time off the grid, seriously. Constructed from lightweight yet durable aluminum, the black powder coat is made for all the nature you can throw at it. Available in different frame sizes to accommodate most truck models, the Ibex is engineered for adventure with versatile full and half-height configuration. It's an ecosystem of adventure possibilities. For more details, visit kuat.com. Kuat, because you will absolutely love this bed rack and go dope places. Do you have a resolution to adventure outdoors more this year? Make it happen with Sierra Club Outings. Leaders in conservation-focused, active outdoor adventures, Sierra Club Outings hosts over 250 small group trips every year where you can backpack, kayak, raft, volunteer, and more. These trips fill up fast, so reserve your spot at sierraclub.org/outings and use the code DIRTBAG to get $100 off. With Sierra Club Outings, it's more than just a trip. It's an adventure with a cause. We'll put a link in the show notes. Check out all the incredible trips they have and make that resolution happen.
Hey everyone, it is that time of year. We need your shorts, your stories, because you power this show. We hear from so many of you that one day you're going to submit your short and send it to us at the Diaries. Guess what? That moment, it could be right now. So make it a New Year's goal, or use it as an excuse to take a break from Uncle Joe at the holidays. You make this community, your voice is valued. You can find all the information you need at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Click on the Write Us tab, where you can find instructions and the submission form. Pay attention to it. It helps the cause. Trust me. Link is in the show notes, so take a moment, click on it, consider it, and then get to work. You've got until January 19th to send us your short. Once again, it's dirtbagdiaries.com/write us. Thanks.
I was like a trash mountain biker. I was so scared and it intimidated me so much.
Alexandra had been logging serious miles on her bike, on pavement. But she knew that to take her bike touring to the next level, she'd need to venture off trail.
I'd tried to go on some group rides, like with a bike shop in Madison, and I'd always get dropped or I'd always crash, or I just like never had fun and couldn't keep up, and I wasn't fit enough or good enough, and it made me really insecure because I was a really good bike delivery girl, but when it came to off-road riding, I was just like absolutely not confident and felt awful doing it.
Coming from the world of riding fixies, when it came time to buy a mountain bike, Alexandra naturally got a single speed. It was all she really knew.
I had incorrect gearing on there, but I didn't know at the time. And I was just like, God, mountain biking sucks. So before I went to ride that Tour Divide in 2015, I had bought a bike with gears.
In the 3 years following Alexandra's first bike tour to the Fond du Lac Reservation, she'd always kept her sights on the Tour Divide. She didn't feel ready to race it, but she wanted to give it a try as a tour, moving at her own pace. So, with her new geared bike, she set out for her longest ride yet. The mountains were steep, the weather was bad. She walked a lot of hills. And it was, by far, the hardest thing Alexandra had ever done. But because she decided to ride in the opposite direction of the racers, she was able to absorb some of their stoke every time they passed. And she knew she'd be back.
By 2017, that's when I was like, I think I could race this.
5 years after her first bike tour, Alexandra signed up for the Tour Divide. As a tour, it had taken her 45 days, but top racers usually only take half that time. The record is just 12 and a half days.
I rode my bike from Tucson to Alberta, Canada as kind of like a warm-up tour. I thought that like if I could get in good enough shape in the 2 months it took me to ride to the start of the race, then I'd surely be able to like do good in the race. Except the tour took way longer than I expected and I missed the start of the race.
Luckily for Alexandra, the world of ultra-endurance bike racing usually allows for something called an individual time trial. Instead of starting at the same time, racers can log their own time and use that to compete.
I told a lot more people that not only was I going to race the Tour Divide, but I was trying to set a new women's record. And, you know, that's hilarious to think about now because like a total rookie going in to setting a record, that's just like huge ego talking. And I started and I quit 3 days in.
Alexandra had run out of money. Spending a few weeks riding your bike across the country requires funds for food, lodging, and bike parts, and she only had $300.
You cannot do the Tour Divide on $300, but I thought I could. I was like, I could just eat peanut butter and tortillas. It'll be fine. But I got my ass handed to me.
After leaving the Tour Divide, Alexandra went to Boise, Idaho. She was nearly out of money, and it was the closest place that she could find a bus to take her home.
Somebody was like, oh, have you heard about the Smoke and Fire? And I had no idea what that was.
The Smoke and Fire is a 400-mile trail race that loops around the Sawtooths, starting and ending in Boise.
My 28th birthday was right in the middle of the race. And I had planned to do 8 races in my 28th year of life. And this was going to be the first one. And I was not going to quit no matter what. And that was my very first race that I finished.
Alexandra thought it would be easy. 400 miles seemed like nothing compared to the 2,700 miles of the Tour Divide. Maybe, she thought, she could even win.
I didn't win. I was like almost the last place finisher. Only 2 people finished after me. And one guy was like in his 70s and the other guy was like frolicking in the hot springs every time I passed him. So it was way harder than I ever imagined. You know, I didn't get into bike packing for glory by any means. My friends were aging out of playing bikes and they were getting serious careers and having kids and raising families. And they just like didn't have a whole summer to go ride around the country. And I kind of decided that there's this one linking factor in all of the reasons I quit my bike tours. It was like I got too lonely. So I thought if I could go to these races, maybe I'd find community and people who valued riding bikes for as long and as much as I did.
She went on to complete 7 more races that year, though one was in a canoe, not on a bike. By the time her next birthday came around, she was looking for a new challenge.
I wanted a theme, so I was going to do my 29th year on a 29er single speed, and then absolutely fell in love with single speed and still ride it to this day.
Enter the single speed, or should we say re-enter the single speed. After spending a few years honing her craft on geared bikes, Alexandra went back to her roots and picked up a single speed mountain bike. This time, something was different.
Sometimes I can even start sobbing my face off when I talk about the analogies between the single speed and me. It is the ultimate underdog because there's this beauty and simplicity in a machine that just goes. There's no derailleur interfering with it. It's just I pedal and I really feel the landscape. There's no shifting out of it. I just have to get up and climb out of my seat or walk. You can't fake your fitness on a single speed. And the single speed also become this analogy of my body. Part of the single speed ethos, at least in ultra racing, is that you start and finish on the same gear. Even if you end up picking the wrong gear, which, they say that if you're riding a single speed, you're always in the wrong gear, and you just deal with the consequences of your decision. You think about what you would have done differently, but it's just that's how life is too. And especially when it comes to my body, thinking about the single speed and the comparison to my body is for what it's worth, it's the only one I got. So I just love thinking about that when I'm riding my bike. When I'm riding this race with one gear, I'm this is the gear I picked and this is the gear that I got. So gotta just fucking figure it out. I can argue why single speeds are so poetic and beautiful, but it all just boils down to if you get it, you get it. And if not, then I think you're missing out.
By 2023, Alexandra had really begun to make a name for herself in the world of ultra-endurance bikepacking. She'd finished and won some of the most prestigious races in the country, all on her single speed.
Finished the Tour Divide 3 times, racing it 2 times, winning the women's race in both 2018 and 2019. Raced the Colorado Trail race 5 times, having won the women's race 3 times in a row, setting women's records, overall beating the women's geared bikers too. I'd set women's records on the Colorado Trail, both eastbound and westbound, and had finished the Arizona Trail 2 times. And all 3 of those races are in the Triple Crown Challenge.
In Alexandra's world, the Triple Crown Challenge is the holy grail. It means racing the Tour Divide, the Colorado Trail, and the Arizona Trail all in the same year. The winner is determined by a total combined time on all 3 courses. It's burly, and each year only a handful of riders complete it. But Alexandra didn't just want to finish.
I had a couple goals, a goal of setting an overall single speed record, an additional goal of setting a women's Triple Crown Challenge record, and, meanwhile setting a new women's single speed record.
Racing at this level costs a lot of money. Alexandra would need to take a ton of time away from work, and since the races are self-supported, she needed money for food, lodging, and travel to and from each race. And even if she performed well, there are no purses or prizes for any of these races.
It's strictly bragging rights.
Technically, they're less like races and more like groups of people deciding to start riding their bikes at the same time on the same course. There's no organizers, no tape at the finish line. Alexandra needed money to support herself during racing season, but it was hard to come by.
As lightly sponsored up until 2023, I think I had maybe $5,000 in cash sponsorships, and I had a bicycle frame sponsor and had some component sponsors. So I was getting my bikes for free, but no money for racing. I went to a handful of sponsors and I just kept asking people for money to support me in racing this and, crafted out a budget, did all these pitch decks, kind of entered a world that I had no idea about, but was pretending that I knew. And people kept telling me no. And, in my head, I'm do you know what this means to like my community, to the people that I love and hold close back home? Do you know what this means to like my native friends who ride mountain bikes? You know, it's not just me out there. I'm like carrying my entire nation with me, and I'm carrying all the natives who ride bikes. I'm like, I am trying to increase access to this stuff, but I need help so I can keep showing up. And feeling like I was pleading with people, you know, to help me reach this goal of doing the Triple Crown Challenge, and just like, no. It's cute what you're doing, but no.
As Alexandra struck out with the traditional sponsorship model, she saw her dream slipping away.
And then I got contacted by the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians out in Western North Carolina. And they were like, hey, what you're doing matters to us, matters to our community. How can we make sure that you keep showing up? And they ended up just writing me a check for all the money I was asking for. And it was kind of this really, really meaningful lesson of like, I feel like I'm doing this so that I can be a better relative, so that I can be the best me to give back to my community. This long distance bike racing and riding has helped me so much in my life, with so much clarity and peace and joy and love and self-love. Like, I want everybody to have a chance to do that, even if they try it and don't like it, but there's like huge gaps to access. So in reaching out to outdoor communities where I perceived all the money to be, and nobody really seeing the worth of the work that I was doing, to have the help come from within the communities I was trying to serve, like, it was really, really meaningful. Like, we take care of our community.
To be clear, Alexandra has no personal relationship to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. So their support made her feel honored, validated, and a little bit nervous.
It was my opportunity to show the world what a Native woman could do, and to use this opportunity that might only come once in my life to like shine, to soar, to fly, and hoping that I was capable of the outcome I perceived in my head, but all the while feeling immensely insecure about whether I was as good as the other racers I was lining up against, which I never really felt like that before. So with all the extra money and extra resources and extra opportunity at my doorstep, I didn't want to screw it up.
The Tour Divide is the first race of the Triple Crown and the biggest by far. It's 5 times as long as the Colorado Trail and nearly 4 times as long as the Arizona Trail. Alexandra would cross every type of terrain imaginable, from high mountain passes to scrubby desert. And, like the other races in the Triple Crown, there's no support. No aid stations, nothing.
While I was in Banff, Alberta, getting ready for the race, I was just like sick with nerves and self-doubt, and as romantic as I want it to be, I went into the Tour Divide like terrified and insecure.
By the time she lined up at the start of the Tour Divide on June 9th, 2023, Alexandra had put a lot of pressure on herself. While around 200 riders were there to race the Tour Divide, only a tiny handful planned to continue on with the Triple Crown. Up until last year, only 2 women had ever completed the challenge. But in 2023, there were 6 women, including Alexandra, hoping to do so. But she would be the only one on a single speed.
I pretty immediately realized I had chosen the wrong gear ratio for the Tour Divide, and it was too hard to pedal for my fitness. The first day, I was like, oh my God, this gear is too hard for me to race. And what am I going to do?
If she hadn't been aiming for the Triple Crown Challenge, she could have stopped, changed her gear ratio, and started an individual time trial like she had in her first Tour Divide. But
part of the rules of the Triple Crown Challenge include starting each of the 3 races with the Grand Depart. So I had already started. It was the first race of the season, and I had made a catastrophic mistake going into the Triple Crown, going into the 2023 Tour Divide. I had held the women's single speed record for the course, and I had very quickly fallen behind that pace on the first day of the race, and proceeded to watch my record dot pull away from me for the first 8 days of the race. So not only did I realize I made a huge mistake, I also realized that there was absolutely no way that I was going to win this race and wasn't really even sure that I could finish the race. Finally decided that I was going to just commit to the mistake I made, try my best, and I ended up catching my 2019 record and passed that record by 2 hours and finished the Tour Divide faster than I ever had. But it was for sure the hardest I've ever tried at anything to only gain 2 hours. It was, I think, the most emotional experience of my entire life. I was spending every day for 18 days in a row thinking about all the mistakes I made into getting there. Just sitting in a great deal of discomfort, and agony, and being like, I am trying, and nobody knows how hard I am trying right now, but I'm trying very hard.
For 18 days, Alexandra covered an average of 143 miles and between 10,000 and 18,000 feet of gain per day. She'd beat her own best time, setting a new women's single speed record. But she hadn't won. There were 2 men on single speeds ahead of her and 5 women on geared bikes. She took 28th place overall out of 100 finishers.
I finished that race thinking, maybe I don't like ultra racing anymore, because that was torture. I didn't have fun at all on my 18 days of racing the Tour Divide, and I'd raced it 2 other times before that, and had the time of my life. So I was like, maybe getting sponsored and racing bikes isn't my purpose.
Alexandra hadn't won the Tour Divide, but she could still win the Triple Crown if she could make up time in the Colorado and Arizona trails. On paper, she was still totally in it, but mentally, she wasn't so sure.
I came out the Tour Divide being like, I can't believe I have to do 2 more races, which is anybody who knows me knows, I don't think like that. So I was really left sorting, why did I feel so soured and scorned and hurt and heartbroken after the Tour Divide, despite on paper, I went faster than I did last time. Meanwhile, you have 6 weeks until the next race. I don't know about other people, but I was absolutely trashed for at least 2 weeks, where I was sleeping 14 hours a day and did not want to ride a bike at all. I was ready to throw my single speed off the mountain. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do if I don't want to ride my bike.
The 6 weeks flew by, and before she knew it, it was time to line up at the start of the Colorado Trail in Durango. From there, the course covers more than 500 miles of terrain, ending near Denver. It climbs up to 13,000 feet and is immensely technical. While much shorter than the Tour Divide, it's not exactly a walk in the park.
And I pedaled a few hundred miles to the start just to get a warm up in, and got a hotel in Durango. And boy, I was a mess of nerves. I worked so hard to show up and be a part of this community. And I'm like, am I easily forgettable? What's the point? What role do I have? Do I mean anything? Just all these internal struggles. And then also wondering, was I just not good at racing bikes? Was I just winning by default? Did these things just happen by accident? And do I just kind of suck? So just all these self-doubt things were just creeping in my head so bad.
And yet, Alexandra decided to try.
Start and ride hard every day and ask yourself, like, is this what you like? And my goal for the Colorado Trail was to figure out if I still liked bikes or not.
On August 13th, Alexandra rode to the start with around 70 other racers who would start staggered to avoid clogging the single track.
By the end of the first day, I'd made it further than I ever had, and I didn't feel like crap. And I was like, I think I've actually, like, I'm having fun. I was trying really hard and having a pretty damn good time.
By the fifth and final day, Alexandra found herself in third place. She had barely slept since leaving Durango.
The other two women had been on geared bikes, and they're both really skilled bike racers. And I was like, wow, I'm like actually pretty close to them despite not having gears. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't suck that bad. Maybe I just like doing this. Maybe I could be competitive. Maybe if I like had more confidence going into the race, I'd be right up there with them.
Despite getting passed in the last 2 miles by a woman on a geared bike, beating her by 5 minutes, Alexandra finished the race with a renewed sense of psych and a new women's single speed record.
After I finished the Colorado Trail, I was in a pretty damn good headspace. I was pretty stoked that I finished. I was pretty stoked that I went as fast as I did. It's as fast as many of my single speed male friends. And I was like, you know what? I did pretty damn good.
With about a month and a half before the third and final race, Alexandra went home to reset.
I came home to the reservation to participate in our annual wild rice harvest, which is kind of like this sacred community cultural thing that we do here. And I came home to my people and my family and friends here and was able to kind of get my spirit back in check and do some of that work to like remember who I was and what my purpose was.
A few weeks later, on October 19th, she set off from the start of the Arizona Trail Race. Another 740 miles with 65,000 feet of vert lay ahead. The course traverses the state from the border with Mexico to the border with Utah. And, as a special treat, because the route crosses the Grand Canyon, where bikes aren't allowed, riders need to disassemble their bikes and pack them in and out of the Grand Canyon. With days of riding ahead, anything could happen.
I actually felt like I could win the race, which was a long way coming from that starting line of the Tour Divide, of being like, I don't think I can do it. I don't believe in myself, to the start of the Arizona Trail. And I was like, I think I could win this thing. And went into that race with an open heart with all my good friends and like raced my guts out.
Alexandra took second place for women, finishing the Arizona Trail in 10.5 days and setting another new women's single speed record. This brought her combined time on the 3 courses to 34 days, 22 hours, and 33 minutes. She hadn't won, but she was happy. Second place is pretty damn good, and she was the only woman to finish the Triple Crown Challenge that year on a single speed bike. And being there with her one gear and her one body, it meant something.
I would have never become an athlete had I not accidentally stumbled upon ultra endurance stuff. I am a bigger bodied human. I'm like 5'9", 210 on a good day. There's like nothing small about me. So like the cool thing about these races, it was kind of the first venue where my body wasn't holding me back, but instead I think it was helping me excel. You know, I got like extra fat on me. I got a lot of muscle. I'm really thick boned. I'm tall. And when you're going for day after day after day at a calorie deficit, I really think that my body served me really well in this sport. So I'd go out into the mountains for, you know, however many days and never, ever think about like, oh, my legs are too big or, oh, my belly's too jiggly. While I was racing my bike, I felt beautiful and strong and powerful and like badass and sexy and like all the things I wished that I felt in mainstream society. I don't know where I would be had I not found this place where if I just make it past the first 12 hours of discomfort, then I start to fly. Then I start to do incredible things that I didn't even know I was capable of. On the trail on my bike is the one ceremony where I feel like my whole spirit is absolutely shining, and the spirits, I call them Manitou, see me there, and that's how they know me. Even if I'm not in my ancestral homelands, I bring my medicines and I do the Anishinaabe do, and I feel seen and I heal and I work through all those traumas of the things that were stolen from my family, from me, and I can come back home and be a better community member. So it's become this beautiful contemporary Ojibwe ceremony for me. How do you get from small res town to pro bike racer? I've been told no a million times. So I'm like, okay, if I can do it and if I'm strong enough to endure it, then maybe I can just like carry that burden so that the next generation doesn't have to. And then they can just like ride bikes because it's fun.
Thank you, Alexandra, for sharing your story. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can use the submission form on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Music today from JV and the Super Molten, Holly Hills, Gilly Dew, Jupiter, Jason Tyler Burton, Dear Nora, and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the Artists, Track Club, or Free Music Archive. All the information is on our website. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. This episode was produced by Lauren Delani Miller with additional production help from Becca Cahal, illustration by Walker Cahal. Becca Cahal is our executive producer. I'm Fitz Cahal, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in.